This week I'm taking a look at habits, and the habit this week, last week it was caffeine, this week it's sugar, next week it'll be salt. And the Chinese view sweetness very, very differently in their 5 elements philosophy. So I'm going to have a look at that in a moment. But it's looking at sweetness as a philosophical thing as well as a flavour or a taste, if you like, because you can think about the sweetness of life. And so if we're very stressed and very busy, and perhaps life isn't going quite the way that we want it to, we might perhaps crave sweetness in the form of food. And this is, one of the reasons emotionally cravings can be so important to look at. So if we think about the Chinese 5 flavours, they have a flavour that relates to each of the seasons. So the sour flavour relates to spring, the bitter flavour to summer, the sweetness to what they call late summer, which is a very sort of midpoint of the seasons. Pungency, the flavour relates to autumn, and saltiness to winter. And each of those flavours feeds an organ. So, for example, the sour flavour feeds the liver and gallbladder. The sweet flavour feeds the spleen, the pancreas, and the stomach. And they tend to recommend that we get these flavours from natural foods if possible. So your pungent flavours would come from things like onions and garlic, your salty flavour from seaweeds and nettle, not salt itself. The bitter flavour would come from your dark leafy greens, and sour flavour would come from things like lemons and vinegar. So very much a natural flavouring coming in. And in the West, we tend to have very stark sugar and salt flavours in foods, whereas in Chinese cooking, it's so much more subtle. And the unfortunate thing about refined sugar and that concentrated flavour of sugar is that whilst our bodies do need a source of glucose for energy, we can break down fats into glucose, we can break down protein into glucose, whole foods that contain sugars naturally are far more balanced. So something like the whole grains, something like root vegetables have a better balance with all the minerals there as well. But refined sugar obviously passes into our bloodstream very, very quickly. It's extremely acidifying, and so we use a lot of the alkalizing minerals in the body in order to neutralize that, which depletes us of those minerals. And of course, your pancreas is very stressful for, because it has to produce a lot of insulin in order to handle that. And then we've got the symptoms, unfortunately, that can come from that consumption of refined sugar, such as affecting our calcium balance, which affects our bones, depleting us of those minerals again that contribute to our immunity. I'm going to go into that in more detail later on. Heart disease. Sugar creates a lot of inflammation in the arteries because it's a fluids issue that it contributes to with blood sugar. It can affect our blood pressure. It can cause dysglycemia, which is sort of fluctuating high and low blood sugar, and eventually contribute to diabetes, and then also to obesity, of course. So I'll be going into the other effects in a little bit more detail through this week.